Hello everyone. The title of this talk on the programme was The History of Autistic Pride and Why We Started It. And that's what I'm going to be discussing. I'm going to come up with this from a personal perspective, so how I myself got involved, simply because I know my own story so well, obviously. That's not to say that I'm somehow claiming autistic pride belongs to me or belongs to, if it's something that belongs to the community. I created the idea in the first place back in 2005, but it was intended for the whole community. Anyway, so to start with, there's a bit of history here, if you give me a moment. Okay, I'm assuming everyone can see this in my web browser page. This is the archive.org, also known as Wayback Machine, showing the autistics.org website as it was back in 2004, which is the same year that AFF was founded. And reading, at the time, I was only 16 and very, full of passion and I was reading through the library on this site, autistics.org. You can see it was basically the home of autism rights movement back then. And there are some famous articles that sort of define the movement, including this one, which I believe is Don't Mourn for Us by Jim Sinclair. I will stick that link in the YouTube chat if possible. Yeah. Basically, you can imagine someone, a young person who's just been diagnosed, everyone around them is telling them about who they are is some kind of horrible disease. That's how I thought. And when I came across all this information from previous experts who were trying to say autism is not a tragedy, it's okay to think differently. And on top of that, saying that the drive to create a cure for autism was misfounded. Essentially, at that time, the predecessor to Autism Speaks, an organisation called CAN, Cure Autism Now, was the big sort of enemy back then. And their entire deal was, as the name implies, focusing instead of on helping autistics, instead was focused entirely on trying to cure autism, essentially eliminating it. And I think there's a graphic on the Autistics homepage that sums it up really well. If you give me a moment. You can see here, this is one of the classic images from Autistics.org, which sums up this issue. Basically, autism prevention boils down to selective prenatal testing and abortion. It's essentially a form of genocide or eugenics. However, at that time, this was considered to be a very non-mainstream minority outsider view and seen by many as extreme. And what made it seem, my browser's a bit, what made it seem even more extreme to many people my browser's been, yeah. After Autistics.org, there was another site when autistics tend to gather in online communities. It seems to match our socialization style better. There was this site Exposer, which at the time was extremely controversial. The thing with Exposer was it had a mythology called the Mythos. And it's one that personally I find quite sort of beautiful and poetic. It asks, what if instead of being some kind of disorder or condition, autism was instead a unique sort of ethnic group almost? What if there was some famous sort of homeland for autistics and Asperger's called Exposer, where we all came from, where autistic traits would have been accepted as normal and part of society? In the mythology, which is not to be taken literally, it's a what if scenario that you got people thinking. It proposed that this island, the island of Exposer, was sort of like Atlantis or similar. It was lost beneath the waves in the ocean, and all the inhabitants spread out across the world, and they carried with them the genes, or what we now call autism. Again, it's not to be taken literally, it's a what if. And to ask if there was a different kind of society, what is currently seen as negative traits or disability in autism would be seen as normal or even an advantage. And we can see this in our actual current society, especially in the tech industry and science in particular. There's a very strong tendency to find lots and lots of autistics working in the software industry, for example. But I believe it's well known fact there's actually a cluster of autistic kids in Silicon Valley, because you have essentially all these geek types who tend to have a lot of autistic traits. You gather, they have kids, and you get this large cluster. Now, sorry, I've just lost my words. Yeah, so Exposer, apart from having this mythos, again, there's a, if anyone wants to link to this site later, it's got some beautiful poetry on it. Apart from that, though, what really made it have an impact was the forum. The forum closed down many years ago. In fact, it closed down in 2004. But while it was open, it was one of the few places online that accepted that autism could be not just not a problem, but something to even be celebrated. And again, it used this sort of mythology, this mythos, as a what if scenario to ask what if there was a different kind of society where autistic traits are a good thing or a normal thing. And it was very instrumental in what later became what we now call autistic pride and neurodiversity, because it was the first place which gathered a large number of autistics for under a banner of "we are not disease, we are not wrong." There's plus points to autism. It was there that myself and Amy, my wife, who also co-founded Aspects of Freedom, actually met. And later that year, we set up Aspects of Freedom with a set of goals which included encouraging acceptance of autism instead of pushing for a cure, advocating for access to services where appropriate, fighting against human rights abuses, and so on. We kept that going for many Yes, and we are still running an IRC chat server with the people, and we promote Autistic Friday every year, or these days it's more wider community that does that. Uh, but some of the campaigns that we were involved in are now have now sort of passed on to other people. For example, ASAN are doing a lot of the work that we had intended to do, and are one of the main forces fighting against groups like Autism Speaks. We also had, apart from formal activist campaigns, we had sort of memes and other events. This one created by Amy. Again, the idea is to say that not being normal is not the same as being bad. If you look at this, it's not a disabled dog, it's a cat. Cats and dogs are different. Cats are not the same as dogs. That does not mean that they're inferior to dogs. And again, there's actually a reason that cats, for some reason, many autistics sort of identify with cats to a great degree. Again, the point is, just like in any other minority group, different does not mean bad. Unfortunately, this is a view that is not shared by wider world, and I should give a warning here. I'm about to discuss something that some people may find distressing. If you are not in the right mindset, you see something potentially upsetting, I'd ask you to look away for a few minutes. I'll just give a minute or so for people to do that. Okay, I'm about to show an image of what is essentially a torture device. One of the things that we campaigned against was ABA, and one of the worst examples I can think of ABA was in a supposed school called the Judge Rotenberg Centre. Thankfully, they no longer use the electric shock devices there. That was banned this year, actually. And I'm going to show the image now, like I said, it may be distressingly some. This is from an application they made to actually, essentially, it's a remotely activated device that sends electric shocks. And the idea was when someone was shown too many autistic traits or stimulant or whatever else, they'd receive an aversive. That's actually directly how Ivor Lovas developed ABA in the first place. He referred to aversives as the active ingredient in ABA. Essentially, if you want to eliminate a behaviour in someone, you expose them to pain every time they express that behaviour, and naturally they start developing a fear of it. It goes without saying that, you know, this is something quite horrendous to do to a human being. Unfortunately, a lot of ABA advocates actually acknowledge that it is literally torture, and even say that if it was in a normal child, because it's often children that are targeted by this, it would be emotionally devastating. However, autistics apparently do not have feelings. And this kind of dehumanization and other attacks and issues such as the parents of autistic children can actually literally get away with murder in some cases. All of these problems were things that we were trying to campaign against. And for me personally, it caused a lot of anger. excuse me one moment. I think anyone who has even a shred of sympathy or empathy for other human beings would have to be angry at the idea of electric shocks being used in children for harmless behaviours, and especially at the dehumanisation it involves. I'm going to come back to this browser in a minute. Yeah. Apologies for that. So essentially, back in 2004, for me personally, I got involved in civil rights activism out of anger for the way autistic being mistreated. I saw people like me who were essentially being tortured and even murdered. And this was on top of the general issues of lack of social acceptance and the way that all these big charities wanted to force us to not be autistic anymore, trying to do what's essentially convulsing therapy. In fact, Ivor Loris, the man who invented ABA, originally started his work on gay convulsion therapy. It is literally the same as convulsion therapy. It is a form of convulsion therapy. However, for whatever reason, history has now vindicated the gay rights movement, and convulsion therapy is now banned in many countries. Not everywhere, as it should be, but it's generally seen as unacceptable, unethical, and ineffective. For some reason, ABA, which is essentially convulsion therapy for autism, is still widely accepted. And it's quite infuriating that it was only this year that electric shock devices, which is Rotenburg Centre, were banned. However, although the electric shock devices are banned, they are still allowed to use withholding food and other abusives, essentially a different kind of torture. Now, because of the similarities to gay convulsion therapy, one thing that I took a lot of inspiration from back then was the gay rights movement. I saw another minority group who had also at one time been seen as mentally ill and disordered and so on, who had managed to sympathize. I mean, there's still obviously a lot of prejudice and homophobia in society, but the gay rights movement has managed to gain much wider acceptance ever since Stonewall happened. And what we wanted to do with AFF was create sort of an autistic Stonewall. I've described Asprosa as being the autistic Stonewall before. Asprosa, when it went down, lots of different groups split off from them, Auschwitz Sweden being one of them. And it's funny, there's a lot of current autism advocates who don't know this part of the history of our movement. They don't know the important role that Sidekick Asprosa played in galvanising everyone and inspiring them to actually take action. But it's fair, and I use the analogy to the gay rights movement. That is where the inspiration for Autistic Friday came from. Essentially, what I realised was it's very difficult to both be proud of something and to say that it's a disorder to be eliminated. You'd have to have a great feat of cognitive dissonance to hold those two views. The fact that gay pride exists, for example, so is a way of demonstrating that it's okay to be gay. And my idea was, can we do the same for autism? Can we create an autistic pride day where we celebrate autism in a similar manner, and so that it's okay? It doesn't matter if you think differently. It doesn't matter if you don't socialize in the same way. As of course there are downsides to autism as well, but as I've always said, any condition which has a mix of positives and negatives is not a disease or disorder. For something to be a disease or disorder, it must have only downsides. If you take someone who's autistic and struggling with issues like sensory overload or lack of social skills, and you give them tools to cope with those issues, they're still autistic. Autism itself is not the problem. It's simply a different way of thinking, a different neurotype, as I call it. Essentially just a natural variation in brain wiring. There's a lot of scientific theories on the biological causes of autism, of course. And this may seem like a detour, but one, again, whether or not this is actually true doesn't actually matter. If you bear with me, I'll explain. There's the extreme male brain theory from Simon Baron-Cohen, which proposes that essentially autistic brains are extreme male. Now, there's a lot of problems with that theory, but the interesting aspect of it is the exposure of sex hormones in the womb that masculinizes or feminizes the body and the brain itself. There's another condition which is also theorized to be caused by hormonal exposure in the womb, and that is gender dysphoria or being trans. This is something I've been thinking about myself a lot recently because I'm trans. I came out in 2018. If you want to look up anything I did before that, you have to use my dad, what's called my dad name. It says Gareth Nelson. Anyway, because I've been thinking a lot about this sort of overlap between autism and LGBT issues, and the fact that there's a lot of autistic people who are trans, something came to mind that one argument against transition people is that what if they're just autistic? This is an argument that keeps coming up again and again. People saying that we're just confused and we can't know our own gender and all this kind of nonsense. And if you give me a moment. There was a recent controversy from J.K. Rowling. Yes, J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, saying that the rise in referrals to gender identity clinics is not because there actually are more people coming out as trans, but because autistics are being exploited and brainwashed and all this sort of nonsense. In response, there was a hashtag on Twitter, which I hope you can see here, called "We Are Not Confused." And essentially it's full of autistic trans people showing that we know who we are. And the reason I mentioned the trans issue is because it strikes me as yet another attempt to dehumanize autistics. and to make out that we're incompetent and we can't know ourselves and all this sort of nonsense. When obviously that's not. This is just one example of many. So on how autism is used as an excuse to say that things like we don't have feelings, we're not mentally competent, we can't know what's best for ourselves, and all this kind of nonsense. And it's the same fundamental reason why groups like Autism Speaks try to speak for us, despite the whole community repeatedly asking that autistic voices are listened to, not these charities. And I say charity, only charities legally speaking, but I don't consider Autism Speaks to actually be a charity in the sense of helping people at all. But all these, let's say, groups, I'll say instead of charities, but are led by entities, not autistics. In fact, for many years, Autism Speaks had a policy where they would not allow autistics to work for them. And they are very much about asking people to listen to them and not to listen to actual autistics. Again, it's part of this dehumanization, and that is one major reason why we want to have Autistic Pride as a signal that it's not a disease or something to be ashamed of. It's something that we can't express pride about. We can stand up and say, yes, we're autistic. No, that's not a bad thing. It's allowed. We can be ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're incompetent or confused or anything else. And some of the myths, I mean, there's not so many of these myths around now, but all those years ago, there were many myths such as autistics are never able to have relationships. There's never been autistic able to get married, never been able to just have just a normal relationship. Parents were told by all of these groups like Autism Speaks that their child would basically never have all of those normal human things. And within us, even if autistics may find it harder to form relationships, we do actually form relationships. I mean, if you look at myself and Amy, for example, we've been married for about 16 years now. So I was just looking at all of that. And of course, we have our hosts for this event, Ian and Rachel. You know, the idea that autistics can't form relationships and never get married is complete nonsense. But again, it used to be a very common idea that people actually believed. It's all part of this dehumanization. And people have asked, well, instead of Autistic Friday, why not just Autism Day or Autism Awareness Day, which I believe already exists? And again, this is why. Because by calling it Autistic Pride, we are automatically making it very difficult to hijack it and turn it into something negative. You can't say it's this horrible disease and we're proud of it. It wouldn't make sense. It is possible that it could be partly hijacked and attempts have been made, but just by using that word, pride, we protect the day from being hijacked and misused. And that's why all those years ago we named it Autistic Pride Day instead of Autism Day or something similar, because we wanted people to be able to express themselves and we want, especially the younger generation, we wanted them to grow up in a world where autism is not necessarily depicted as this awful, tragic thing that people are seeing as worse than cancer and all this horrendous dehumanizing nonsense. Instead, we want people to focus on their strengths and what makes them unique as individuals, and for children to be able to grow up without shame for who they are and how they think. That's also partly the reason behind the date, June 18th. In that, basically at the time, we had weekly meetings with that, and in one of those meetings we were discussing the plans for Autistic Friday and what date we choose and so on. And it was decided that we would pick the birthday of our youngest member at that time. And the reason for that was because they were sort of representative of the next generation, the people we were fighting for. And now, I often say a lot of current autism advocates who see it as completely normal that autism is not something to be ashamed of. And many people who aren't even autism advocates, I see on social media all the time, people will call out of us, will calling it a disgrace or saying it's a bad thing. And obviously, I'm not going to take credit for that whole sorts of progress. Alone was hundreds of people who have helped work towards that. But I do believe that the concept of autistic pride has helped a lot with that sort of progress. It's that people now are more and more seeing it as normal, that being autistic is just another way of being, it's another way of thinking. And it's okay if you have an obsessive interest, then go and indulge in it. Why not? What is actually wrong with that? In many ways, that can be a strength, and even if it's not useful to others, it can still be something that brings you joy. So why not indulge in it? Why not embrace who you are? That's something I believe any minority group needs. People need to be able to be comfortable with who they are and expressing themselves. And again, the concept of pride is all about that. Being able to say it's okay to be autistic, just like in the gay rights movement, the concept of gay pride, what told people that it's okay to be gay, that it can be something celebrated and not something to be ashamed of. One issue that people often bring up is the date being in June, and with the inspiration taken from gay rights, is it an event only for LGBT and queer autistics? That is no, it's for everyone. The fact it's in June was basically a historical coincidence. That's an issue that people have brought up time and time again. By this point, it's been established for over a decade. So trying to move the date to avoid confusion now is not really feasible. And because the event is not centralised, it belongs to the whole community would have to agree to change that date. And currently it seems that the vast majority of the community are happy with it being June 18th. Whereas events are organised on that date, again, this event today is apparently only being organised for today because it's the weekend and makes it easier for people to attend. Otherwise, it would have been on the 18th, as I understand it. So that is both the history of autistic pride and how it sort of evolved and why we created it. so that people can have something to be proud of, something they can refer to and say it's okay being yourself, or if you're autistic, be your autistic self. Even if you have problems from autism, and there are some, of course, that doesn't take away from the positives. And there's lots of neutral traits as well. Those neutral traits and those positive traits, we can celebrate them or leave them alone. They don't matter. Any negative traits and downsides we can support people with without demanding that we stop being autistic. We don't have to literally torture people and try to form a behavior conversion therapy just because someone's different. Being different is not a bad thing. Anyway, I'm going to ask in the YouTube chat if anyone has any questions, because this slot I was given is an hour long and I've essentially covered what I was going to cover. So if anyone has any questions, please do it in the YouTube chat now.
Let me just see. Oops. Sorry. Sorry, Gwen. I muted my. I meant to mute.
Joseph has just asked, what do contemporary activists get right and what do we get wrong, in your opinion? That's a tough one, because I tend to see the vast majority of activists as doing the right thing. I see myself as having stepped back from activism myself, because so many other people have sort of picked up the cause and continued it. Like I've mentioned groups like ASAN, and they're doing essentially the work that I want they have to do. I struggle to think of what contemporary activists get wrong. One thing I would say is sometimes in any community, you get infighting and personal disagreements, and that is not something unique to current activists. That has been going for years, but basically infighting, and instead of coming together and having that unity, having people attacking each other, and rather than attacking our actual enemies, people will, such as Autism Speaks, Judge Rotenberg Centre, and others like that, people attacking others within the community, weakening all of us. That's one thing I believe we always get wrong. I hope that answers your question, Joseph. Let me just. Sarah was asked, is there any Aspie preservation project? I'm not sure what you mean by that, to be honest. Can you clarify what you mean by preservation project? Ah, uh, consulted efforts to resolve our online history. That should be. It's something I've thought about myself because I see a lot of current activists are aware of how important autistics.org and I suppose they were very key to inspiring everything that came later, including AFF and including everything that came from us. If you noticed earlier in the talk, I used archive.org to access those old sites. So that history is preserved, but there's not a special effort within the autistic community. If that is something people are interested in, then I would personally be happy to discuss it and plan it out. And there's lots of ways to do that. Basically, we can mirror all information and have multiple backups. Joseph just asked, are old AFF posts accessible by archive.org? I believe some of them are. I still have a copy of the database from old forums. And this, unfortunately, is a little bit awkward. When I was talking about inviting, we did have times where that sadly occurred on the AFF forums. So although there are a lot of highly important posts there in that database, which I do have backed up, I would be very wary to immediately open all of that to the general public. If anyone has anything in particular what they want to search for on it, then they can get in touch with me. In fact, I'll put my email address in the chat. I don't think there's any data protection issues apart from in people's profile info. The public posts, they are not covered by the Data Protection Act because by posting people gave permission for information to be published. I'll look into whether we can release some kind of archive of those old posts. As for things like autistics.org and Asposa, I don't believe that all Asposa forums are accessible by archives.org, unfortunately. I have tried myself. That may be lost to history, unfortunately, but the Mythos and other content on the site is by archives.org. What I'd suggest is we could have some kind of effort to pool all of that data, put in distributed backups, and everyone keeps the backup. Has anyone else got any other questions? Again, was because I didn't fill out the full hour slot here, there was plenty of time for anyone to ask anything, so ask away if you've got anything. Do people who organise autistic pride events get it right? Every event that I've seen has been very much in the spirit of what we wanted. some people prefer to just celebrate on their own, and some people prefer to go to these larger events that have been organised. And generally, as long as it's celebrating autism and not spreading this idea of autism as a tragedy and all this other stuff, it's doing the right thing. Let me. M94 has just asked, what would I like to see in the future of autistic rights? I'd like to see more distributed events, more people celebrating it on their own, in their own way. And again, having this decentralization, it's something that belongs to the whole community. I never want to say one organisation completely claim it, even with good intentions. I want to say lots of different people on different organisations. Which leads me on to Janine Brooks, what is the best way to promote autistic rights to autistic communities without getting the organisations involved? Word of mouth, I would say. But one thing I'd question is, when you say the organisations, are you talking about autistic-led organisations, or are you talking about groups such as Autism Speaks? If autistic-led organisations, in my view, that's exactly what we want. If it's an organisation that's not run by autistics, that should be extremely rare. I would not trust anything run by Autism Speaks or Dan or any of others, for example. But sorry, I got a bit lost. But if we have events run by autistics, whether a jointly gathered in a legal structure, an informal organisation or not, as long as it is autistic-led, that's a good thing. How can we get our message to those parents who don't know about the dangers of ABA? I think the best thing to do is to demonstrate the abuses of it. The problem is there's essentially two things marketed as ABA. One is actual ABA, which we know is harmful and is essentially conversion therapy and torture. The other is, in my view, something fraudulent. It's not as abusive, which is a good thing, but is abusive financially, where they essentially do a form of play therapy and call it ABA. And the problem there is that parents of autistics go into large debt when they get told it's medically necessary and all this nonsense. Sorry. And
it's been shown to be not effective either.
I'm sorry, Ian?
And it's been shown to be not effective either.
Yes, that's again, just like most of it doesn't actually work, but it's marketed as being medically necessary. And you see these autism parents groups keep advocating for and saying rights to be funded by the government and so on and so on. Just ask, what's the role be, if any, of local governments? Again, I'm going to look at the gay rights movement as inspiration yet and say, what role do local governments have in gay pride events? Is that something that we should model? And some people have complained about commercialisation of pride and so on, but as long as, for any pride event, for any minority group, as long as it's been led by people in that minority, then some kind of assistance from outside agencies is, I think, possibly a welcome fund. I know that the Scottish Government flew the Infinity Sign flag recently and have done for a few years in AP Day, and things like that. So in solidarity, I think is very appropriate. It's where what we don't want is for local governments and these charities to take over management of events and organisation. It has to be autistic lads, otherwise it's not Autistic Pride anymore. Have you ever contacted the organisers of Mad Pride? Unfortunately, no. To be honest, I wouldn't see that as my role personally these days. I'm sure people in the community can do that. So that's up to people organising events if you want to collaborate with other pride movements. Rachel also just brought up the social model of disability. That's one that Autistics.org promoted heavily. And there's always a very subtle distinction between what people all called the militant. Again, because AFAF was quite unique, people called us militant for opposing a cure and so on, which I always found silly. And Autistics.org did much the same stuff, but much earlier. And they heavily promoted the social model of disability. The social model, for those who are unaware, basically says that what makes someone disabled is the society around them. It's not something innate. Just like if the island at Bethesda was real, then autistics would not be disabled on the island at Bethesda. Of course, Bethesda is not a real place, it's an idea.